athletes in the world. The 21-year-old is one of just 4 Iraqis who've qualified so far for the upcoming Olympic Games in Beijing, and she is the only Iraqi currently training for the Summer Games inside the war-torn country. From Baghdad, NPR's Eric Westervelt has her story.
Clouds of dust blow over the weed-choked quarter-mile track at Baghdad University. In the stifling noon heat, sprinter Dana Hussein lays a bath towel in the dirt and begins to stretch under a tree. Nearby, her coach Yusuf Abdulrahman nervously twirls a stopwatch. He recalls a training session during the height of the sectarian bloodshed, when he and Dana had to drive across Sunni Shiite battle lines to try to reach the track.
I think we drove through 8 firefights that day. I thought we were going to die.
The violence one day even encroached here on this rundown track in the relatively safe Jadriya neighborhood. Abdulrahman says both he and Dana had to hit the dirt. A sniper opened fire from a nearby rooftop.
When she was training, the sniper shot the first round and it crossed near Dana and hit the tree. She dove for cover. Then another round hit the field.
It might seem impossible, but Dana Hussein says she tries to tune out Baghdad's turmoil and focus on running.
I'm very ambitious, despite all the challenges I face in the streets. If the street is blocked or they're shooting, I'll take a different road, because I want to reach new goals and move forward.
Hussein pulls her black hair into a ponytail, thin gold bracelets dangling from her wrists. She says qualifying for the Olympics in the 100 and 200 meter dash is bittersweet.
I want to train now and cry at the same time. I'm happy because I qualified and will represent my country, but the problems, it's so hot here, and there is no training camp abroad for me. Sometimes I can't make it here to train because of the security situation.
Hussein comes from a sports-loving family. Her brother's a bodybuilder. Her father was a champion bicycle racer with the Iraqi national team. Hussein steps into the searing 105-degree heat and onto the university's ragged track, parts of which have ankle-twisting cracks and crevices in the asphalt. She puts on her special track and field sprinter sneakers. One running shoe is badly ripped along the seams and begins to warm up. The Iraqi Olympic Committee was once run by Saddam Hussein's sadistic son Uday, who would famously abuse athletes who didn't perform well. Nowadays, the committee is no longer a bastion of brutality, but it is broke, sectarian, politicized, and its members a regular target. Just a few weeks ago, the deputy director of Iraq's Olympic Committee was gunned down at a Baghdad bus station. The Olympic Committee's director and some 30 employees were kidnapped in the summer of 2006. They're still missing. The 3 other Iraqis who qualified for the Beijing Games, all men, are currently training overseas. The committee promised Hussein a training camp abroad. So far, it hasn't materialized. Now she says it's probably too late.
The Olympic Committee cannot do anything to provide me a training camp. They gave me one in Italy one time, but they made me go without my trainer and coach. I prefer to just train here with my coach than to go abroad without him.
The track clothes the committee gave Hussein didn't fit. She's had to sew the Iraqi flag onto running outfits she bought with her own money.
If I leave this sport, I think life will stop. Life must continue, even with the security situation so bad, because I have ambitions. I love this sport too much.
Last summer, the Iraqi soccer team's improbable win at the Asian Cup brought the shattered country together, at least for a fleeting instant. The Iraqi sprinter knows that she's a long shot to medal in Beijing. As long as I have ambition, Hussein says confidently, maybe I can achieve something for my country. Eric Westervelt, NPR News, Baghdad.
This is NPR, National Public Radio.
Support for NPR comes from the Pajamagram Company, offering women's pajamas delivered overnight and for Mother's Day in a gift hat box at pajamagram.com. From Acura, featuring the all-new, completely redesigned Acura TSX with available ELS surround sound at acura.com. And from Vanguard, offering investments designed to help individuals, institutions, and advisors reach their long-term financial goals at Vanguard.com. This is NPR, National Public Radio.
NPR's Morning Edition brings you the latest news. And after the headlines fade, we pay attention to the aftermath. Tomorrow we'll ask why the Army is still struggling to treat wounded soldiers like Scott Metcalf.
You might see 10 different doctors with all your different care, and at one point 10 different doctors were giving you medications.
I'm Steve Inskeep. 14 months in an Army hospital on Morning Edition from NPR News.
Listen for Morning Edition beginning at 5 o'clock tomorrow with WOSU's Marilyn Smith. Coming up in state and local news in 3 minutes, the Franklin County prosecutor has filed a motion to hold without bond both defendants in the shootings last night of 2 Columbus police officers. We'll have more on that story coming up at 5:32. Showers and thunderstorms possible Friday, but still warm tomorrow, a high of 76.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Robert Siegel. In this half hour, Indiana's Republican governor talks about his state's brief moment in the sun in this presidential primary season.
We're so glad that the presidential candidates, at least of one party, came here. But when they're gone in a week, Indiana's going to have to tend to its own problems by and large.
That's coming up after the news.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Carol Van Dam. Republican John McCain says it wasn't President Bush's fault when he stood before a banner on the deck of an aircraft carrier that read "Mission Accomplished" 5 years ago, but says the president is responsible for the bungled early weeks of the Iraq War. Nearly 90 Iraqis have been killed in the last 3 days in Baghdad alone. Women and children were among the dead. NPR's Katie Dunn reports from Iraq.
The majority of the recent violence has been in Sadr City, a mostly Shiite neighborhood. Many fighters there are loyal to the anti-American cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. Today, Sadrists held a press conference to talk about their frustration with the American-backed government in Iraq. A spokesperson said that he had a copy of a document Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki signed restricting oil shipments into the neighborhood. Sadr has declared a ceasefire, but says people have the right to defend themselves. Katie Dunn, NPR News, Baghdad.
President Bush is asking Congress for another $770 million to help the poor in developing countries deal with rising food prices. Mr. Bush said at the White House today that in the world's poorest nations, rising prices can mean the difference between getting a daily meal and going without food. The funds would also strengthen programs that help communities increase productivity. The woman referred to as the D.C. Madam was found dead at her mother's home in Florida today. Police say Deborah Jean Palfrey hanged herself with a nylon rope. Captain Jeffrey Young of the Tarpon Springs Police Department says Palfrey left suicide notes.
It was more than one note. I believe it was approximately 2 and then some other notes in a book.
Palfrey was convicted of racketeering, money laundering, and running a prostitution ring in Washington that catered to some politicians. She was to be sentenced in July and faced up to 55 years in prison. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 189 points to close at 13,010. The Nasdaq was up 67, ending at 2480. This is NPR.
Support for NPR comes from the Pew Charitable Trusts, driven by the power of knowledge to solve today's most challenging problems at pewtrusts.org.
Good afternoon, I'm Christina Morgan, WOSU News. Franklin County Prosecutor Ron O'Brien has filed